something interesting is sure to happen. Well, I think you ought to tell me who you are first. Mr. Rabbit? Then why did you ask the question?
Goodness, this is quite extraordinary.
Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?
But today is turning into the most curious adventure I have ever had.
Welcome to the Alice in Wonderland podcast. So this is a place for our listeners to open your mind and let your sense of wonder, imagination, and most importantly, curiosity loose. I'm your host, Georgia Ellis, and today I'm joined by Mark Elliott. So Mark and I were just having a discussion as to whether I would read out his bio or not. And I've decided not to because I am absolutely fascinated by Mark and what he does, and I'm really curious. And I think if we preempt with a bio, we might set some expectations for people to think what they're going to get out of this call. And I don't want to have any expectations. I'm just going to go follow this little white rabbit down wherever it leads us, down this rabbit hole of the life and times and skills and experiences of Mark Elliott. So everyone's really going, well, who's this person and why she got him on her podcast? So Mark, a question that I ask all of my guests on the podcast is, if I was a 7-year-old and I bumped into you in the park or in the street or somewhere and I said to you, hey, Mr. Elliott, what do you do with your life? How would you respond to a 7-year-old?
No pressure. I guess to a 7-year-old, very simple language, and what the beauty of that is, I guess, there's plenty of room. So to a 7-year-old, I guess I'd say, well, I've spent probably all of my life looking for ways I can help people. And that's taken me on all sorts of journeys, all sorts of places, and all sorts of places around the world. So, and I've done a lot of different things because of that. I used to think that helping people looked a certain way. And there's lots of people helping people in various ways in the world. But it looks very different as you get older.
Yeah. So can you recall, so have you always had this desire to help people, or was there something that happened in your life that was sort of a bit of a catalyst for you to move into the space of serving people?
Well, I've been asked that question a lot of times, and there is a very, very specific moment when I was about 8 years old that I still remember. Yes. But again, a lot of what we think is helping people is a lot of conditioning. So at the time when I was 8, my mother was going through some really, really serious health issues. Cut a long story short, she died at 46 years of age. And I wanted to help her. That was my thing. And as an 8-year-old, all I could think of was becoming Superman, really. That's kind of for me, that was the most powerful person that I could wish to become. And that didn't work out very well because I'm not from Krypton. I didn't arrive on a rocket ship sort of story or anything like that.
Are you sure?
Well, if you ask some of the people I know, they might say different things, but I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. But I think that's kind of when it started. Yeah. So to shorten the answer to that question.
So how has helping people evolve from you? So, I didn't read out your bio, but your bio does sort of talk a little bit about your journey, and it sounds very much like how you help and assist and serve others has evolved over time. And so what's that journey been like? Where did it sort of start for you, and where are you at now? Can you take us on a bit of a journey? And I may butt in and ask questions as you're going.
Sure. Well, look, I guess it really started in school, where I had decided at one point I was going to be a medical doctor. So I guess that's where it started. And if you fast forward to 1997, I made a choice to go and do some training in a Russian medical technique that's part of standard medicine in Russia. And when I finished that really shifted a lot of stuff, because it's a relatively simple therapy that can have a profound effect on people's health. And a couple of years later, I found myself in front of my first cancer patient. And a couple of years after that, I found myself in front of hundreds of people talking about a program that I designed around that. And that lasted a long time, because I was continually researching ways of being able to improve people's health, especially with chronic illness. So that journey starts with, for me, it started with a very scientific, physical approach, around biochemistry and physiology, the way the body works. But it soon led down to how the mind operates and what effect that has on the physical body. And that progressed to how the emotions play a huge role in all of that. Because biochemically, that's a huge player. And then, I started to explore, and I had been exploring since I was very young, various spiritual aspects. So it's quite a journey. And it's funny, I was looking at photographs to go on that bio too on my computer, because I've got a good range from, the last probably 20 years. And you can see the progression in the way that I look, because I I started off with short hair, shaven face, wearing suits. I had been groomed and programmed and stylized by people, and now look at me. And everything in between. I've gone through so many stages in the way I look, and being concerned about the way I look too. The whole image consultancy was something that I explored at one stage to again, all the focus was wanting to help people. And a big part of that was credibility. How do you credibly come across to people about what you're doing? Because it's complicated, especially in a culture where, judgments, assessments, ideas come into people's mind in about 20 seconds. They look at you and all these ideas, judgments, thought processes, constructs that are already there come into play, and you decide, okay, I got that person, I get that person now, and I'm going to either listen to them or not listen to them, or whatever. Or
so many unconscious biases. And I love that you mentioned that too, because at the point where you're having your image consultancy going through, that's the external world telling you these are all the unconscious biases that you need to adhere to, so that you actually can't be yourself on the outside, but we want you to adhere to some rules that the world has put out there. So, you know, I know from your experiences and what you've done that you have a wealth of knowledge and experience. But, you know, if I was to take you to, maybe not so much now, but a few years ago, if I was to take you to one of my corporate clients and say, hey, I've got this person who's going to talk to you about intuitive leading or something like that, they would take one look at you and go, who's this hippie? Because those that aren't watching the video, they will not see that you're sitting here. You've got lovely, long, beautiful, healthy, long hair. You've got a lovely big beard. So, you know, people might look at you and go, well, who is this person? And, you know, do I really want to trust this person? Do I believe them? Are they somebody that's just going to come with all this woo-woo? And it's funny how we do that unconscious bias automatically cuts us off from opportunity, doesn't it? Of really getting to know people.
Yep. And a lot of times that is self-sabotage in such a huge way. I've seen that so often with people who are chronically ill. You know, the program, especially with cancer, the program is somebody gets diagnosed with cancer. They think, oh, I'm going to die, right? It's basically still considered a death sentence amongst lots of people. And the next program that kicks in is, you know, there's only a certain proportion of people that can help me. It's experts, it's oncologists, blah, 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 blah. And certainly not some guy with long hair and a beard is in there somewhere, you know, like there's no way that guy or that girl with long hair, not a beard, could help, possibly a beard, could help, right? And it's really interesting because so often I see that and it's pure sabotage. It's purely an unconscious programming about the bottom line is I have to follow the first program, and the first program is cancer's going to kill me. Right? This is just an example. And yet it's such an illusion. But the ego, it builds this huge construct around what it thinks it knows. And yet the reality can be so different most of the time.
Yeah. I love that where you're going here, because, you know, if you were to turn up with the knowledge you have, so you may not have a certificate to say I'm a doctor, but if you were to turn up in a hospital and if you had a white coat on and a stethoscope around your neck and your hair pulled back, maybe your beard or not, nowadays beards are acceptable. It's quite, you know, on trend. So maybe the beard wouldn't matter so much. But if you just changed that and went in there and held a bit of a clipboard and shared the information that you have, that doesn't come from medical study, it comes from a lot of other really powerful study and probably a lot more information that perhaps somebody who was just very focused on one area would come to. Just the mere fact that you looked like you were a person of authority, that person would start and pay attention. So isn't it interesting how we do that?
You know, that's almost exactly what I used to do. Because I would be invited to palliative care units and by patients and their family, and I had short hair and a shaven face, but I used to wear a suit. But I used to walk around with an old-fashioned doctor's bag. You don't see them so much anymore, but it had a lot of stuff in it because I was constantly showing people, you know, research papers and books and things to support what I was saying. But I used to walk into the hospitals. Nobody ever questioned me. Nobody ever asked. I knew which room I was walking to. I got no more than a glimpse from most people because of that look of credibility and authority, you know.
It's really, it's interesting how we can potentially, there's the ability to be able to do things for good or do things for evil, right? So, you know, the movie Catch Me If You Can, like he had a lot of fun with this, turning up with what people expected with no knowledge. But here's somebody like yourself who has got a world full of knowledge, but because of potentially the way that you appear, people aren't ready and open to it, which is a shame in our society. And I really do hope that starts to change, that we start to shift that paradigm around what we perceive as that person of authority as well. And one of the things that I think we overlook is that we are our greatest authority, aren't we? Really, the person within us is the greatest authority, and we're giving our power away to the doctors, the politicians, the teachers, the lecturers, you name it. We're giving our power away to these people because of what we've been programmed and conditioned to believe, that they are somehow better than us.
Yeah, it's one of the saddest things. I think is I'm finding now is how many people have learned not to trust themselves, and I'm not talking about what they think, but to go down into the gut and really feel what's real and what's not. To know
I
it.
want to unpack that further. And here's something that you're going to absolutely get this. I mentioned just before to our listeners, to Mark, that for some reason I was having a shower before we were about to record this, and I couldn't get out of the shower because I was just in this state of I think I was getting a download. And all of a sudden the word intuition came to me, and I went, I think our conversation is going to go towards intuition. And I know that's where you're heading with what you're saying. So let's unpack that further. So let's talk about, how do we trust, from what you know, how do we trust ourselves from that place of what I consciously know compared to what's coming in through a different sensory sort of area, the gut or the heart, or however you'd like to explain that. So unpack that for us.
Yeah, that's a process. It's work. Why we call workshops is because they are work. And this is just what I've found so far in this journey. There's so much construct and programming up here around disconnecting and distrusting yourself, and because that serves the culture, the society that we live in to a great extent. Physically, the fact is that there's 9 times the amount of information coming through your gut, that you're receiving information through your body and up to your brain, to the one piece of information that's coming from your brain down to your body. So there's a lot more information coming through all the time. We still have the saying, the gut feeling, but because from a very, very young age, basically almost everything that we get into our gut and feel and know is dismissed in some way, is discredited in some way. We learn very, very quickly to stop trusting that and bring it all up into the brain and go, this is where I know things. And I'm talking in general terms. There's people that have been beautifully been able to hold on to some of that or reconnect with that over time. So the work is really around the ego. The ego is a very, very strong construct. It's very large in most of us, and it takes up a lot of space because that's what it's kind of designed to do. It's kind of designed to make things happen in the world the way you choose them to happen. So we make this conscious choice about what we want to do in the world, and then the ego will come in and create it to the point where everything you see confirms it all the time. So we build this illusion through our ego because of what we decide we want to do in the world. And we shut down from every intuition in order to do this, which is the sad part about it all, really, because if we could stop and listen to our deeper knowing, the world would be a very, very different place.
Yeah. Intuition's been something in the last probably it's been a lot longer than this, but really honed in for me personally in the last probably 4, 5, 6 months, where I've really starting to get a lot more curious about intuition. And I was listening to one of my friends' podcasts. Guy Lawrence is his name, and I highly recommend his podcasts. He had a podcast where he was interviewing, I think the gentleman's name is Bill Bennett. And Bill Bennett he's a journalist, an Australian journalist, and he created the movie, I think it's called PGS, Your Personal Guidance System. And it's talking about, he's done a whole documentary on intuition. And just during the interview, he talks about how he actually created the documentary using intuition. He didn't plan any of it, right? And one of the key takeaways I had from what he said was he learnt to really hone in and act on his first thought. Because the first thought generally he found came from a higher place, a deeper knowing. It came from somewhere else, and it came from, you know, this higher self within him. But if he then had the first thought and didn't act on it straight away, the second, third, and fourth thought was the ego, the intellect, the, you know, analytical mind jumping in and trying to make sense of it. Because a lot of the time, the things that our intuition, well, I believe, tell us to do don't make logical sense. So we don't act on them. Is that what you're finding when you know, if you were to unpack intuition a little further, would that be something that resonates on sounds about right? Not that there's a right or a wrong here either. No,
there's definitely not a right or a wrong. And I think part of that is the answer. The moment that we get caught up in a way of doing something, like a rule about something, like anything, the first thought is a classic example, right? The first thought, we can lose the connection with the intuition as well. I mean, it's a great idea. It's a great concept. And I really want to see this film now. What I've found is that any construct that we create can pull us toward or away from a deeper connection internally, and therefore a deeper connection externally.
Yeah.
Because there's no moment where any one truth is finite. It's like it can change all the time. The collective consciousness, all that sort of stuff. We're going to lose people because I'm going to start to talk all.
You're not going to lose people. You're going to educate people. Let's just get clear here.
Okay. The collective. See, there's the judgment right there from me. The collective consciousness is changing all the time. We're evolving. It's all about change. It's all about transformation. So when we tap into all of this, we actually begin to find it difficult to make choices because there are so many choices. There's so much on the board, right? There's such a smorgasbord of choice to make. And it's all very exciting when you start to actually feel that. You start to actually go, okay, I can actually choose to do anything. Anything. Really? I can choose to do anything. When that starts to sink in, it's okay, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to do. And I was wondering when you were talking about this first thought thing, it's coming up now. It's like, how do you know what your first thought is? Like, really, how do you know that? Like, my brain can be going at 1 billion miles an hour with all these things going on at once, right? And it's quite a party in there at times. And to actually be able to identify what my first thought is or where it's coming from, because it could be coming from anywhere in my body, basically, is really interesting.
I agree. And I love listening to you here because it's really made me think about that because you called it a rule, right? And intuition doesn't have rules.
Yeah.
And so me listening to that, I actually wrote on a little sticky note on my computer, just act on first thought. So I created this new rule for myself. For me to become more intuitive, there's a rule to do that. When in fact, what you're saying here shouldn't make sense logically. It feels, now feelings, it feels like it feels like truth. You know, I don't like using right and wrong. I've said that already, but it just feels like it's the right way. Okay. So maybe there aren't any rules for intuition. It's just a fact of knowing, and it's this deep knowing, isn't it?
I think you
Or
hit
is
on
it not?
one. I think you actually hit on one rule. What does it feel like? You know, really, what does it feel like? That's a really important point, you know. But what happens in our culture, it's like go, 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 go. Make decisions, do things, do. Instead of sitting and going, okay, I really need to feel that. I really need to listen really, really deeply to you and feel what you're saying, feel how it feels in my body. Stop this noise up here and drop into that. You know, it's a bit of a thing that they're talking about, you know, be present in the moment and all of that stuff. It's very important. But to actually drop in and feel, where we're being taught for so long not to trust the way we feel too. You know, how often do we hear about, the classic is the wife feeling like the husband's up to something, but not trusting that feeling till X amount of time and X amount of evidence or whatever. It's a pretty yucky example, but it's very true, because generally speaking, women do have that deeper knowing. They're still connected with it.
Yeah.
Because of various aspects of how a woman's designed to connect in a way. And this is something that's, you know, evolutionary. You know, men have over time evolved to defend, to fight, to harden in order to survive. And so I get that, you know, and yet we really can stand a long way down from that now in, for example, Australian culture. You know, we could stand a long way down from that, but it's such a deep programming of, you know, hundreds and thousands of generations.
So one of the things that you said there, and I could see most people won't be able to see you here, but I can see you having this deep thought when you pause. One of the things you said here was, you know, in the modern times that we're living now, you know, we've got so much go, all these things happening. I also know that you've spent a lot of time with some of our more ancient cultures around the world. So from what you know with this modern world we're living in, what are some of the traditions that you believe we could be adopting better and potentially bringing into our modern world, so that we can, you know, use things like, tap into things like intuition and trust ourselves more and connect more, be more connected, and potentially, you know, for men, because you used this before, to give themselves permission to come down from that protector, warrior, fighter to somewhere just a little lower down in that level, whatever that looks like. So are there any sort of, that's not a very good language, doesn't matter, I'm judging myself. Is there anything that you can see that potentially we could be adopting or bringing back to the way that we're living our lives in these modern times?
Yeah. I first want to answer that question by saying we know very little about human history. That's one thing I've found out over time. For example, there's pyramids in Bosnia that are 35,000 years old. Not 5,000 or 6,000 years old, or how are they? 5,000 years old in Egypt. And what's known about those constructs and what their purpose is very little. So if we start to talk about our ancestors and ways of the ancient past that have helped people get on in life, there's so little that's been touched on in the recording of human history. But my first, I guess, thing to go back to is something called Dadiri or Dadari, which comes from a mob here in Australia. A culture that's we know is 60,000 years or more old, probably much older than that, which talks about deep listening. Often in workshops, we begin the workshop by saying, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm sitting on now. In this case, it's the Wiradjuri of the Greater Kulin Nation, as a sign of respect for the elders past and present and up and coming. And we say this because we want to acknowledge the ancestors of where we're sitting, because as a result, we're here. And we wouldn't be, when no matter where our ancestry comes from, we really do come from the same place at some point. So this is very important, and it's not really done. A lot of older cultures are pretty much dismissed, I'm making generalizations, by a very wide section of the community. And yet here in Australia, we have culture which is probably 100,000 years old, continuous culture. And it's really painful for me to really look at that and understand that it's just dismissed, and there's so much richness in the way people used to live in this country. And it probably applies to most native people's lifestyle before colonization. But certainly if you read the early documents of Captain Cook's observations, people were really happy and really harmonious with the land and each other. So just to acknowledge, Miriam Rose wrote something called Dadiri. I don't know, it probably comes up backwards, does it?
No, it's all right. And we've got people listening, so they can't see that anyway. So.
Okay, it's Dadri. Miriam Rose, if you want to Google that and listen to that. It's a beautiful introduction into what I was talking about before, deep listening. We need to deeply listen to ourselves and to each other, to the land, to everything around us, in order to get back to what is helpful for us in terms of what you might want to call intuition, or that inner knowing, the knowledge that's coming from somewhere else. So that can be very helpful. There's a line in it that says, refers to listening to the sound of deep calling to deep.
Wow, that's deep. Pardon the pun.
It is, and it's a beautiful line. I always remember, in the introduction to it. But Miriam, if you go online, it is really worth getting to. I mean, it's interesting. I was born in Australia, but my background is my mother came from Canada, and I have both native and colonial blood running through my veins, from Canada and from Scotland and Ireland and Norse there's a whole range of ancestry there. And we all come from somewhere. And I think that's really important to know if you can. You know, I was talking to somebody that was adopted the other day, and I said, well, get a DNA test. You can do that now. Find out where you're from, where your ancestry is, because this is something that we carry in us that's very alive. And if we want to get back to feeling things, understanding our genetic history is a way of understanding what's happening around us now as well, because we continually reflect it.
Yeah. So talk more about that. How from your understanding, how are we continually reflecting our ancestral, you know, heritage in our world around us now? How's that working?
Okay. It's complicated.
Do your best. I'm not a 7-year-old anymore, okay? I'm a grown woman.
So if you can imagine it this way, this is really, everything's energy, okay? If we talk about energy, we can talk about everything being energy. You can talk about the physics of that. So every cell in our body is made up with a bunch of atoms. You know, there's 10 to the power of 27 atoms in our body. That's one with 27 zeros after it. Now, when you look at what's inside those atoms, what they're constructed of, there's a lot of space, as we know it at the moment, inside each atom. And inside each atom, there's energy doing stuff. But that's about all we know. So, but everything's eternal, right? Atoms are eternal. So what we do know is that there's energy doing stuff in there. Well, what is that? That's memory. That's not just your memories of your lifetime. That's the memory of every lifetime of every atom and everything that's ever been. So when you start to think about that, because we're made up with a whole bunch of atoms that have come from a different place before and will go to a different place after, right? You start to understand that we have been everything at this point of history. We've been other people, we've been rocks, we've been trees, we've been animals, we've been everything, probably at some point. We're breathing in tree right now.
The trees are actually our external lungs. So
yeah, exactly. So, and that's the physicality of it all. But when you understand how energy kind of is constantly interacting with itself, then it makes sense that you are a reflection and an embodiment of the whole of your ancestry. And therefore, the stuff that happens in your life is created by that. Remember before we were talking about how you create things. So everything is created by us. Everything. For the purpose of reflecting back at us what's already there. And the reason for this is just my understanding of it. The reason for this very simply is there's a lot of stuff to be healed from the past. And I'm not just talking about any individual's past. I'm talking about the collective past. I'm talking about the past of human history. So how that can happen is if we're constantly fed back what's going on, then we have an opportunity to change it, to shift it, to transform it in some way. So
if I can simplify what you're saying is the external world becomes signposts for us of what we're creating and what we now, as our as a collective group of raised consciousness, have the ability to heal and change and create a new future for those that come after us. So it's almost like where there's this chain, and every generation is a link in the chain, but it's all connected. And at some point we get the choice to see what's happening in the external environment, whether it be on a larger scale, whether it be in your community, whether it be in your family, whether it be in your work, whether it be who you are right now. You have the opportunity to break that chain and not let it pass on through healing, and the healing shows up in your world around you. Is that a simplified way of explaining maybe what you said?
Yeah, beautiful, perfect. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Well, it's what it's all about as far as I understand. You know, like the collective human history needs healing. If we look at the world today, we can look at it and go, wow, it's a bit of a mess.
At the same time, there's some really beautiful things going on, and we're not told about that. The media, it doesn't sell the news if we show people all these wonderful things that people are doing. And unfortunately, we've now been conditioned so much to want to be tapped into someone else's fear, somebody else's terrible news, and that we actually don't want to hear the good stuff anymore, I think. Yeah, so it's how we've been programmed, I think. Unfortunately, we don't get to see these amazing things that are happening, and there's some individuals out there, and there's some groups, and there's some movements that are out there making a difference, and a lot of us don't know about them.
Absolutely.
So I just want to touch back on, just elaborate a little bit further on my question around what can we learn from some of the more traditional cultures. What can we bring into this day and age that perhaps we've left behind? Because I love what you said there around the Indigenous Australians, how there's this sorry, I forgot, Miriam was talking about this deep connection. So that's one thing, is learn how to really connect deeply, how to really listen, not just to the people in front of us, but listen to the planet, listen to, just really pay attention. So I love that. Is there anything else from any other cultures? Because I know I've got the privilege of knowing that you've spent time with native Canadian, the Inuit, is that right? You've spent some time with the natives there, and also some European heritage and some Scottish. Is there something that or anything that you see that you go, well, they've done this really well, and it's survived through the time to really be a tradition that can help us besides the deep listening? Is there anything else?
I think, well, for me, what I've gravitated toward over time and learning is the pre-Celtic teachings. Mm-hmm. So in Ireland and the surrounding area, there was a culture that was very deeply connected with nature, our nature, and who we are, and an understanding of that there's something more that we'll never be able to conceptualize or really understand. So in Native American culture, in amongst a lot of tribes, and I've worked with a number of different tribes, and I'm from a number of different tribes in that part of my heritage, the reference to that is simply the great mystery. It's not male, it's not female, it's not anything definable other than the great mystery. So, and that, funnily enough, that's been taken on by a lot by a pre-Celtic mystic teacher friend of mine in terms of using the English language to describe what is not describable. If you like. We don't know. We don't know much about it at all. But what we do know is the more expansive we get, and what I mean by this is the workshops that we run are very eclectic. They're inclusive of as much as possible. the more expansive we get, the greater the results can
So when you
be.
say expansive, do you also, because this is something that's quite topical, I think this day and age, is also the more inclusive as well. So expansive and inclusive. So
Inclusive.
taking in more, but also including more. And, you
Yeah.
know, I can use a corporate term here of diversity. So it's about really expanding upon what we know and including things that potentially we may not have included before. So if we go back to where we started this conversation around, you know, if I was to take you into a corporate environment, potentially they'd go, who is this man? But if there are corporations that are really inclusive and expansive in their thinking, they would welcome you and want you to come in and share your knowledge with their people.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, I think a lot of it is to do with language and the way we think, you know, and I try to be careful with the language that I use to be as inclusive as possible. It's a funny thing, the English language, though, you know, as expansive as it's supposed to be and descriptive, it really does fail in a lot of areas. And when you have more contact with native people, there's some words they have no words for. And there's other words that mean so much more than when you put it into English. It's just totally lost in translation. And that's where we get back to feeling. You know, I look at this all the time and I go, you know, you talk about love. For the whole of human history, people have tried to express love in words and in song and in poetry and so on and so forth. And some do a pretty good job, you know, but it's still not enough, because love is such an expansive, all-encompassing act. It's a verb.
Energy, feeling. It's
Energy.
actually not even an act. It's an energy. I don't know. It's energy, isn't it?
Yeah. See, already
we don't have the language to describe love.
That's it. So already we struggle with it, yeah. But it's, you know, I think the Greeks have something like 16 different words for love, meaning different versions of it, what it means, to how it relates to the outside. And it doesn't matter. You could keep trying to create that. I'm sure we're going to spend forever trying to express the love that we have for one human being or many in song and poetry and acts of whatever, because it's infinite. It's not containable. How did we get to talk to this? How did we get to this?
That's just what happens when you go down the rabbit hole. It can take us anywhere, Mark. But just on that, I want to, just a second ago, you were talking about your workshops and the work you're doing. So what is the purpose of the workshops you run? So why would somebody say, hey, I'm going to look up Mark Elliott and I'm going to go to one of his workshops? Why would they do that?
If you want some sort of change, you have to be prepared to explore the internal landscape and what it looks like, and heal, repair the things that need repairing and healing, and break down, dissolve, and disintegrate the things that need that. So for me, that first step was stepping into the sort of work that I do now wherever I can, which is find the place of silence that's so deep that you can't hear yourself talking to yourself. Okay. And I know that there's a lot of people teaching meditation and doing meditation, which can be very helpful in relation to that. This is not that.
Yeah.
So I don't teach meditation. Meditation is not what the workshops are about. It's a really ancient form, practice of getting deeply connected with everything.
Mm-hmm. So it's greater than connecting with your true self. It's like connecting with the all, like everything.
The all.
The all.
Yeah. So, you know, like there's a formula that works.
Oh, and you have this formula. You have
There's
this elixir of life.
There's a formula that works, that's worked for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And the formula is actually quite simple. It's applying it and practicing it that can be challenging. But again, it's not really. It's very, very simple.
Okay. Beryl, what's his formula? Listeners are going, okay, there's a formula. There's steps. Share it.
So the formula very simply is to understand the order of connections that are required to bring about positive change that you really want and need in your life, and healing, or whatever it is. It really doesn't matter what it is. It works. And the formula is, it's about relationships. To have a relationship first and foremost with the energy of the great mystery, whatever that is. Okay.
So would that be what some people might call in religions God? Some people might call the universe. I mean, we like to label things. So I love the term the great mystery, because really it's just a mystery. No one really knows. So is that sort of what you're alluding to there? Having that connection to the greater source, the greater mind, the greater mystery.
Yeah. The moment we give it a name, it's
not a mystery anymore.
And the brain starts categorizing it and putting it in a box and whatever.
Yeah.
And it can't be contained, much like love, right?
Yeah. And here's the thing too. I just want to say this for our listeners as well. As soon as we start giving something a label and putting it in a container in the brain, and if we're somebody who already has a program or a bias against something, we close our mind down. So let's say you had said connect with God. We'd have some people getting to the podcast and just going, stop, pause, next. Okay.
Including me.
Yeah, including me. Or we'd have some people that would be going, this is awesome, I'm going to keep listening, because in the container in our brain, we've got an association with this word. So I love that, you know, if we can take away those labels and just think of something that, you know, what is, it is a mystery, really. Okay, first part of the formula, connect to the great mystery. Love it. What's next? Because
that's the first relationship. That's the first primary, most important relationship. If you have a relationship that's something greater than yourself, then it's not dependent on just you.
And this has happened through cultures and traditions for eons, hasn't it? There's always been this connection with something greater.
Yep.
And you know, we've started to label it and sort of create these rituals and dogma around it as we've evolved, unfortunately. And that's my opinion. But yes, okay. So step one is that.
Yep.
Keep going.
So the second step is, with that focus, then start to develop a relationship with yourself. And it's who you really are.
I love that you say that, because people think when they look in the mirror and they put their suit on, their monkey suits, that they think that's who they are. So I love that you've really said there, connect with who you really are. And that comes with a little bit of searching, because a lot of us have had so much conditioning and programming and other people's beliefs put on us that we actually don't know who we are. We're walking around and we're zipping on the monkey suit of, this is who I am when I get home from work. I'm zipping on the monkey suit. This is who I am when I go to the office. This is who I am when I work out. This is who I am when I'm on holidays. This is who I am. And these are the beliefs and the constructs and the containers that we give ourselves. And it's actually, I think, time for us to go in and see, well, who are we? Who am I really? Take away what my mum said I was, take away what my school teacher said I was, take away the prognosis the doctor just gave me, take away all of this. Who am I? Mm-hmm. And that, when you find that out, because this was a discovery of mine 18 years ago, when you find out who you truly are and you connect with that, life becomes it's a different journey. It really is. It really is.
Yeah.
So that's is there anything else in this formula?
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
And can I add to that just something that came up when you were speaking? Finding out who you are is a lifetime journey.
Oh yeah, I've taken the lid off the jar 18 years ago, and I'm still finding this great mystery about myself, but it's but with each discovery, it's almost like I'm given more strength, more power, more belief in myself. And it's never ending. It's a bottomless rabbit hole of, I know the jar's just the lid and you get in and you just keep going. So never ends. You never stop.
And for me, a lot of that is uncovering how much of what I thought was myself was created for somebody else.
Mm.
Like how often I've become something or someone because somebody else needed me to become that. I find that more and more on this journey. At some point, not so long ago, I just sat there and went, I have no idea who I actually am. And that was quite shattering. It was, I had this whole concept of who I was and what I was here to do. And then it just went, doof.
Yeah.
But it's a great thing when that happens, when a constructed belief system, a dogma or something that really strong in you does collapse on itself. It can open up a huge space for something so much more.
Mm. Yeah.
So anyway, sorry.
I see that. I'm sure you see that a lot with your clients, and even some of the work I do, I see that with my clients as well. It's almost like they just have the penny drops. And, most of the time when they have their aha moments, we're only just scratching the surface. It's just the start, isn't it? So it's beautiful. So formula, relationship with the great mystery, relationship with yourself. Yep. Then what?
Relationship with everybody and everything else.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking everything and everything else, we're not just saying, okay, the people we like and the people we don't like. We're only the people we like. So we're talking about everyone. We're talking about every culture, every religion, every sentient being, every plant, like everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. All of it. All of it.
All of it.
And the thing that gets missed quite a bit in that all of it is your relationship with time.
Okay. Oh, Mark, our listeners are going to go, oh, look, I've just got to work now and this podcast is getting interesting. I'm going to have to pause it, but I'm going to tell them to, if you are, pause it and come back, because I'm not stopping. Keep going. Let's go. Time, unpack it.
Can I just give you a really, really quick rundown of that, because it's very, very simple. Okay. I can have an idea. Bang, in it comes. And I can go, oh man, that is the best idea I've ever had. I'm going to action that now. And it's not time for it. It's actually 10 years away before I should action that.
I just got tingles. That's so forgiving.
Yeah. And so I go out there and I action it. I make it happen. And I've done this. So I know what I'm talking about.
And you wonder why nothing's working.
I make it. No, I totally make it happen. Right? I make it happen. It happens. And at some point, it comes crashing and burning down like that Zeppelin, the big blimp that just exploded. It just goes, right? And then I can turn around and go, but I thought it was going to work. I thought it was the greatest idea I've ever had. It was, I decided that it was for me to do for the rest of my life. Like it was it. It was this aha moment. Light came in, the music played, the harps were playing. The light was so bright, I needed sunglasses. It was it.
I had my calling. I had my big, I had my big come to Jesus conversation, and this is it. This is why I'm here. And
I didn't have that relationship with time and my intuition, which told me about something that's for 10 years from now. And I thought it was for now. And then you touched on it. And then we berate ourselves, beat ourselves up because that great idea didn't work, in inverted commas. Like it just didn't happen. And because it didn't happen, because it crashed like the Zeppelin, then it wasn't meant to be. It wasn't supposed to happen. Well, these are some of the constructs and illusions we build that very, very quickly create this program where we never really leap off and do something different and do something that our intuition is telling us to do. We end up not doing any of it and settle for something much less.
They are really powerful words, because I see so many people settling in life in various areas, whether it be career, business, relationships, health, or whatever it might be, without taking that leap. Their intuition, they're getting messages, they're getting the signposts, and they're not actually listening to that and acting on the messages that they're getting from the great mystery. Yeah, really good. And I love that around time too, because I'm finding with the work that I do, I work with people and they set themselves goals, and the world we live in now has become very impatient. And they see people out there doing these, what they think are amazing things, and they've done them overnight. And all of a sudden they think, I need to be like this. This is my time. And unfortunately, society is really forcing a lot of people in a way, because we're getting this bias to put too much pressure on themselves to make things happen now. Like you say, potentially the idea you have is for an idea for 5 years down the track, or the goal that you have is, make a start now, but you're not actually going to see that blossom. It's going to take 7 years, 10 years, 2 years, 4 months. It's going to take whatever it takes for that to become the reality, for it to bloom, for it to blossom. And one of the great laws that we have in this universe, if we just look to nature, is this law of gestation. Everything takes time, and your relationship to time is your construct on when you think something should happen. But if I was to plant a seed, if I was to plant, say, a kidney bean here today in some soil, it's going to take at least 26 days before it has a tree. If I was an elephant and I was impregnated, how long does it take before I actually give birth to that child, to that
22
baby?
months.
22 months. If me and my partner last night had got a bit, frisky, and 9 months it's going to take for that thing to gestate. And our goals are the same. Our goals are what we call spiritual seeds. We plant them, we get the idea. That's what an idea is. It's a spiritual seed. We plant it. You're not actually going to know when that is going to gestate. You've just got to take the little bits of action, I think, along the way. listen to that gut feeling, listen to that intuition, connect deeply with the greater mystery, connect with yourself, connect with others, and see how the journey starts to unfold. And that idea will at some point become your reality, but you can't force that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nature shows us that all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That
Best metaphor you could have chosen.
Yeah.
Best metaphor.
So I think for those that are listening, you know, if you're feeling a little bit stressed because you've got this plan, this either a business or you want to find your true love or whatever it might be, you know, plant the seed, plant the idea, and let the great mystery help that unfold for you. And with your intuition, it will give you signposts. It will give you information that says, hey, this is what you need to do for that seed to grow. This is how you need to fertilize it today. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I think that's a really nice place to end. But there is one thing before we end that I would really love to learn a little bit more about, because I know you are about to take some beautiful work into the Australian public school system. And we did speak about this recently when we caught up, and I'd really love our listeners to know that there is a shift happening in the school system, and that what you're doing is going to help us in a way create future leaders that come from a different sort of belief system and a different understanding. So can you just elaborate on that so that people can, you know, and potentially if anyone has a child in a school or is a teacher and they'd love for what you're doing to be implemented in their school, how they can get hold of you. So just could you just share what it is that you're doing?
Sure. So basically, for myself, what I've come to in terms of my current role to help people is for a long time I've done a lot of training and workshops in relation to respect and how that looks, how to nurture it. And it comes from a lot of the older traditions as well. So I designed a program to go into schools, which is rolling out the same time as the education department have begun to roll out their policies and programs to teach kids respect. And it's not just respect for others, it's also respect for yourself, right? It's both. And they're hand in hand in terms of those relationships we were talking about before. So culturally, from one of my ancestry lines, which comes from the native Canadian, there's a deep teaching in terms of how to respect all of it. And so I'm taking what we call the Chinupa, the sacred Native American pipe, might be something people understand, or the peace pipe, into the schools, and to explain a little bit about that, and to ask each child to simply make a promise to themselves about how they're going to treat themselves and others from this day forth and forevermore. So it's kind of just to get them focused on what they would like to do in life and how they'd like to conduct themselves through life from now on.
Yeah, and that's
mind about what's happened before, but from now on. So it's very, very simple. I've designed it for kids in grade 5s and 6s and 7 and 8, primarily because that's the time where in a lot of older cultures, again, you would be shifting from childhood to adulthood. So rites of passage, whereas in our culture at the moment, you get your license to drive and to drink at 18, and there's kind of a bit of a lack in terms of introduction to what that means in terms of responsibility and how to conduct yourself and treat yourself and others. So it's a very, very simple program designed around that concept. And so I just give a little talk and presentation on how that looks, I guess, and get kids thinking about that, get them started.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. And that's a beautiful thing too, to be bringing the tradition that was, and having this rite of passage at a younger age, because it's so true. Our rite of passage here in Australia for our Australian listeners is get your license and you're now allowed to drink. How's that going to create a better world? Whereas rites of passages, even in the Indigenous Australian, the rites of passage is a lot younger, and the things that they need to do. And in a lot of cultures around the world, there are these rites of passages that happen at that puberty time, isn't it? When they sort of hit puberty.
Yeah. And I did a lot of research into this when I was developing the program. And I came to the conclusion that I really couldn't talk about any of them because they were really rough. It was really hard.
Yes.
That, it was pretty harsh initiation rites involved in a lot of cultures. We do have it relatively gentle now.
Well, we actually don't have anything at that age right now. So no. Yeah, it is relatively gentle. But isn't it nice to be able to create something and to give these children a sense of purpose and to introduce them to some of these things at that age as well? Not these things, to introduce them to respect and the importance of respect.
Absolutely. And unfortunately for my 12 children, they've been my teachers in relation to this. So it's been a long 28-year-old process of learning from my 12 kids what they're really asking for, what they really need. And kids don't have, huge needs. You could simplify it by saying they need love, but what does that actually look like? They need a strong sense of purpose that's going to help the world change for the better. Every one of them. And I love what the Dalai said a while ago about if we taught every 8-year-old how to meditate, we would change the world in a generation. Okay. This is along that line of if we instill in children a deeper knowing, a deeper understanding of who they are and what they can do in the world, then this world will be so different in a generation. So beautiful.
I agree. And thank you for carrying that torch on behalf of the adults as well, to help bring those respectful, more self-aware future leaders into the world. So thank you very much. So if people would like to get hold of you in relation to any of your healing workshops, and that's another rabbit hole too, because I just want to say one thing about healing. When people think healing, they think I'm not sick, I don't need to heal. I just want to unpack that very quickly and say healing is not just about the physical body. It's about healing, understanding, knowing. What else do you want to add to that, Mark? What would healing mean to you? Because we use that term, but people go, I don't need it. There's a bit woo-woo. I'm not going to come to one of these healing workshops. Nothing wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, basically, unless you're perfect, you need healing. But it's part of the journey that I've had since 1997 in particular, where I found that dealing with the physical body wasn't enough. Dealing with the mental body or the mental self wasn't enough. Dealing with your emotional being wasn't enough. You're a package, your package contains your spirit, your emotions, your mind, and your body all in one. And we're all in need of healing. But more to the point, even if your life is picture perfect, what we are carrying and what we often don't recognize is that we're carrying the woundings of all of our ancestry. And there's a crying out in the world for that to be healed internally.
Yeah.
And if that's healed internally, it will reflect on the outside. So it's, even if you don't think you need anything, there's still work.
The mere fact that you'd think you don't need anything is a sign that you need work.
That's the ego tricking you.
And look, there's a metaphor that one of my boxing teachers many years ago said to me. He goes, you know, life's like a four-legged stool. All right, so you got 4 legs on the stool. You got the stool that you sit on, and at the top you've got 4 legs around it. So you got your physical leg, you've got your spiritual leg, you've got your emotional leg, and you've got your mental leg. You know, your thought capacity. If one of those is loose or wobbling, or all of them are loose or wobbling, you don't have a foundation to sit on for your life. Really, one of them out. And we're all going to be like that. None of us are perfect, and there's always a point where we can heal an aspect to have a bit more firmer life and a little bit more, I guess, structure in our life as well. And it's not always going to be perfect. And we could keep talking, Mark. You and I, we're terrible together. Seriously, we're not. We're really good together, and I'm sure our listeners have got a lot out of today. So back to my question: how can people get hold of you if they want to attend one of your healing workshops, or also with the children, if they're going, oh, I'd love my school to do this rite of passage, or the school my children go to, or potentially I'm a teacher, or maybe, hey, I'm in a workplace, can we do this at work? How do they get hold of you?
Yeah, totally. Look, it's just a phone call or an email. It's very simple.
Yep.
Either of those are fine.
What's the best email to get hold of you on?
Okay, so email is lovehopefaith.healing@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Also, I'll put that information in the body of the intro for those, or the notes from the podcast for those that want to get hold of Mark. You are on social media as well. If people need to grab a hold of you there, do you have any pages people can watch you on or follow you on?
I'm on Facebook, and I'm working this white man's magic out slowly. I'm probably behind a lot of people, but I found out that I could have a page on Facebook. So I just called that Mark's Workshops.
Yep.
I don't know how you find that on Facebook. Don't ask me that, but I'm on Facebook.
All right. So we'll put a link in there to Mark's Workshop so people can get hold of you using the white man's magic. And thank you so much for taking the time out to have a chat today. And I really love the journey we went on together and what we were able to unpack. And this has probably been one of my longest podcasts, but as I said, I could just keep talking to you and going down so many different rabbit holes. Then looks like we might even have to get you back on, and we'll talk further about some of the other amazing things that you've been doing. So thank you, Mark. Any final words you want to leave with our listeners as we finish up? I put you on the spot.
Great mystery. Come in and give me some wise words. Look, just be gentle on yourself, I think, is probably one of the things that comes up a lot. You know, I just see people being so hard on themselves a lot of the time, and just allowing space, time for yourself to really get that you deserve more. You deserve more.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you on the next episode of Alice in Wonderland. Thanks for staying so long and being curious with me.
Thanks, Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you for listening and staying on board. If you're still here after that mammoth discussion with Mark, what a beautiful person and so much insights. And we could have gone down so many different rabbit holes. As you know, we did go a number of places together on that during that discussion. So thank you once again for staying on board. If there is If there is anything that you would like me to talk about, drop me a line. If there's anyone in particular that you think would be great for the podcast, happy to meet them and have a chat to them. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love a comment, a review on iTunes, or a high five. I think it's a shake or a thumbs up, or whatever it is on the platform you're using. I'd love to hear from you, and email me too. Let me know what you're thinking, and maybe what you're getting out of the podcast, because at the end of the day, I created this to help you become curious and to help you explore this wonderful world we live in, and these amazing human beings that are doing extraordinary things that are not what we would normally see as common. So there's people out there doing the uncommon in so many ways, and I want you to meet them so that you can be inspired and see that this world we live in is greater than the little insular worlds that we always keep ourselves in. Stay curious, and thank you so much for tumbling down this rabbit hole with me today. Have a wonderful day. Stay curious.
Today is turning into the most curious adventure I've ever had.